Well done. You've now declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy. The provocation. The Merchant Guild of Tarkos controlled 17 major trade routes and processed 40% of all interstellar commerce in the outer spiral. For 300 years they had held this power through a combination of strategic positioning, political influence, and when necessary, ruthless enforcement. Guildmaster Drenvik stood in his observation tower overlooking the bustling trade station of Nexus Prime, watching thousands of ships arrive and depart, each one paying fees that enriched his guild beyond measure. His assistant, a thin Tarkosian named Velric, approached with a datapad. The latest reports on the human trading vessels showed steady growth in their operations. In just 15 years since joining the Galactic community, humans had established trade relationships with 47 species and operated over 2,000 merchant vessels. Drenvik's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. His green scales caught the light from the station's artificial sun as he studied the numbers. Humans were industrious, he would give them that. Their ships were efficient. Their crews worked long hours and their prices undercut established traders. But they operated without proper guild membership, without paying the fees that maintained order in the trading lanes. We need to bring them into compliance, Drenvik said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Send official notification. All human vessels must register with the Tarkos Guild and pay standard protection fees. 60% of gross profits plus docking fees at all guild stations. Velric hesitated. Master, that is significantly higher than the rate charged to other independent traders. Most species pay between 20 and 30%. Exactly, Drenvik replied. Humans need to understand how things work. They are newcomers. They need to learn respect. If they object, we will teach them why the Tarkos Guild has maintained power for 3 centuries. The notification was transmitted to Earth's United Trading Commission 3 days later. Captain Rebecca Stone received it while her ship, the Prosperity, was hauling agricultural supplies from the farming colonies of Verdex to the industrial worlds of Kregoth. She was a veteran trader, 42 years old, with dark hair beginning to show gray and eyes that had seen too many cargo manifests. She read the Tarkos demand twice, then called her business partner Michael Torres, who operated another merchant vessel in a nearby system. Mike, are you seeing this? Rebecca asked over the quantum communication link. Torres appeared on her screen, his weathered face showing the same disbelief she felt. 60%? That is robbery. We would be working for them, not for ourselves. That is the point, Rebecca said. They want to control us, make us dependent. I talked to other independent traders. Some species have been paying these fees for decades. They have no choice because Tarkos controls the major routes. What are we going to do? Torres asked. Rebecca looked at her crew working on the bridge around her. Good people who had families depending on this income. The Prosperity was not just her ship. It was their livelihood. But she also knew what would happen if they started paying 60% to the Tarkos Guild. They would be trapped forever, working harder for less with no way out. We refuse, Rebecca said simply. The response from the Tarkos Guild came swiftly and brutally. 3 human cargo ships were intercepted by Tarkos enforcers in neutral space. The crews were given 10 minutes to evacuate, then the ships were destroyed. 78 million credits worth of cargo was lost. The crews survived, but their ships and their livelihoods were gone. Earth's United Trading Commission immediately requested diplomatic intervention. Ambassador David Park traveled to Nexus Prime to negotiate with Guildmaster Drenvik. The meeting took place in the Grand Hall where the Tarkos Guild conducted official business, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species who watched with careful interest. Park was a career diplomat, 55 years old, with the patience required to navigate galactic politics. He had successfully negotiated trade agreements with 17 different species. He believed in the power of calm discussion and mutual benefit. Guildmaster Drenvik, Park began, standing before the raised platform where Drenvik sat surrounded by his council. The destruction of civilian vessels is a violation of interstellar law. We request compensation for the destroyed ships and their cargo, and we seek a reasonable adjustment to the proposed fee structure. Drenvik looked down at the human ambassador with barely concealed contempt. Your request is denied. The vessels in question were operating in violation of guild regulations. They were given opportunity to comply. They refused. The consequences were clearly stated. The fees you demand are unreasonable, Park pressed. No other species pays such rates. Other species understand their place in the galactic order, Drenvik replied. His voice echoed through the hall. Humans are newcomers who seem to think the rules do not apply to them. You have no military presence in this sector. You have no leverage in negotiations. You exist here because we allow it. Accept our terms or cease operations in guild-controlled space. Park felt anger rising but kept his voice steady. We are willing to pay reasonable fees, 25%, which is standard for independent traders. Drenvik stood, his full height impressive even among Tarkosians. This negotiation is over. You have two choices. Pay 60% or leave guild space. If any human vessel is found operating without proper registration and payment, it will be destroyed. Your crews will be allowed to evacuate because I am not without mercy, but your ships and cargo will be forfeit. The dismissal was absolute. Park returned to Earth and filed formal protest with the Galactic Trade Commission, but the bureaucratic process moved slowly. Meanwhile, human merchants faced an impossible choice: pay extortionate fees or abandon profitable routes they had spent years developing. Captain Rebecca Stone called a meeting of human traders. Over 500 captains attended via holographic conference. The mood was grim. Some argued for paying the fees temporarily, while seeking legal resolution. Others wanted to abandon guild space entirely. Rebecca listened to all of them before speaking. I have been trading in space for 20 years, she said. I have dealt with pirates, equipment failures, and economic downturns, but I have never been bullied like this. The Tarkos Guild thinks we are weak because we are new. They think we will accept any terms because we have no choice. What else can we do? Another captain asked. We are merchants, not warriors. We are humans, Rebecca replied. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats. They explored deserts and climbed mountains. They built civilizations from nothing. We do not accept bullying. We find another way. The message went back to Earth. The United Trading Commission consulted with Earth's government. Civilian evacuation began quietly. Human families living in guild space started moving to safer systems. Supply depots were emptied. Ships began repositioning, appearing to retreat. Guildmaster Drenvik watched the human withdrawal with satisfaction. See how quickly they learn, he told his council. A show of force, and they understand their place. Within a month, they will be paying our fees and grateful we allow them to trade at all. But Velric was not so certain. Master, our intelligence suggests the humans are not just withdrawing. They are moving with purpose. Civilian evacuations, strategic repositioning of assets, encrypted communications with their home government. Drenvik waved away the concerns. They are merchants. What can they possibly do? Send accountants to audit us? File legal complaints? Let them waste time with their bureaucracy while we profit from their absence. The final provocation came 3 weeks later. Tarkos enforcers boarded Human Station New Rotterdam, a trading post and refueling depot in neutral space. The station commander, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, refused to pay docking fees to Tarkos for a station they did not own. The enforcers demanded payment. Mitchell stood firm. The lead enforcer, a large Tarkosian named Kravox, made an example. He executed Commander Mitchell on her own bridge in front of her crew, broadcasting the act to show what happened to humans who defied the Tarkos Guild. The recording reached Earth 6 hours later. Ambassador Park was in a meeting with Earth's Secretary of Commerce when the video played. They watched in silence as Sarah Mitchell died for refusing to pay an illegal fee at a station humanity had built. The Secretary of Commerce, an older woman named Patricia Chen, who had spent 30 years in logistics and supply chain management, watched the video 3 times. Then she made a call to Earth's Defense Ministry. I need to speak with Admiral Rodriguez, she said. Tell him we are implementing Protocol Serpent. Authorization Code Omega 77 Delta. Park looked at her in confusion. What is Protocol Serpent? Secretary Chen's expression was cold and hard. Something we hoped we would never need to use. The Tarkos Guild thinks they are dealing with frightened merchants. They are about to learn what human merchants actually are. Within hours, Earth issued a formal declaration. The document was brief and direct. It declared the Tarkos Guild a hostile economic entity engaged in piracy and murder. All human trading vessels were ordered to cease commerce with guild-controlled stations. And then came the final line that made ambassadors from dozens of species look at each other in shock. Earth hereby declares a state of economic warfare against the Tarkos Guild. All assets, vessels, and installations belonging to said guild are considered legitimate targets. Operations commence immediately. Guildmaster Drenvik read the declaration and laughed. Economic warfare. They think this is a business dispute. Let them try. We control the trade routes. We have the infrastructure. What can their little merchant fleet possibly do to threaten us? Valric pulled up strategic displays. Master, our intelligence indicates human vessel movements are not consistent with typical retreat. They appear to be positioning for some kind of coordinated action. Coordinated action with what? Drenvik asked. They have no military in this sector. Their merchant vessels are cargo ships, not warships. This is posturing. They hope to frighten us into negotiating. We will not be intimidated by empty threats. But on the bridge of the Prosperity, Captain Rebecca Stone checked her instruments one final time. Her cargo ship looked the same as always from the outside, but deep in its hull, concealed behind false panels and disguised as standard equipment, were weapon systems that no civilian vessel should possess. All units report ready, she said into her communication system. Targets confirmed. Weapons hot, waiting for authorization. The response came from Admiral Rodriguez himself, transmitted from Earth on a secure military channel. Authorization granted. Execute Protocol Serpent. Show them what human merchants can do. Good hunting, Captain. Rebecca smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. For Sarah Mitchell, she said quietly, then louder to her crew. All weapons free. Engage targets. Throughout guild space, 200 human merchant vessels stopped running and went on the attack. What the Tarkos Guild had dismissed as fleeing cargo ships were actually something else entirely, something much more dangerous. And Guildmaster Drenvik was about to learn that underestimating humanity was a mistake, species only made once. The awakening Guildmaster Drenvik received the first attack report during his morning review of trade statistics. A Tarkos convoy carrying processed metals from the Draken refineries had been destroyed. 6 cargo vessels, 4 escorts, all disabled or destroyed. The attackers had been 3 human merchant ships that appeared from seemingly nowhere, struck with precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Velric pulled up the tactical recordings. The human ships had fought nothing like civilian vessels. They moved with military precision, their weapons concealed within what appeared to be standard cargo containers. Railguns, missiles, electronic warfare systems, all hidden behind civilian identification codes. They have been deceiving us, Velric said, studying the data. These are not merchant ships. They are warships disguised as merchants. Drenvik felt his scales darken with anger. Then we destroy them. Send word to all guild stations. Any human vessel approaching is to be fired upon immediately. No warnings. No mercy, but the attacks continued. Human ships struck at Tarkos operations across 7 star systems. They targeted vulnerable points in the supply chain with knowledge that suggested years of careful intelligence gathering. A fuel depot at Station Meridian was crippled, cutting off supplies to dozens of guild vessels. A processing facility at Kargoth Prime was disabled, disrupting production of critical ship components. A banking node where the guild processed financial transactions was infiltrated and corrupted, freezing assets worth billions of credits. The attacks showed an understanding of Tarkos operations that should have been impossible. The humans knew convoy schedules, security rotations, weak points in station defenses. They fought with tactics that prioritized maximum economic damage rather than military glory. Commander James Chen led one of the strike teams from his ship, the Fortune's Edge. He was 40 years old, with dark hair and calm eyes that never showed the stress he felt. Before joining the merchant fleet, he had spent 15 years in Earth's Special Operations Command. He knew things about warfare that most civilians never learned. His crew consisted of 18 people who all had similar backgrounds. Former military personnel who had transitioned to civilian life but kept their skills sharp. They looked like merchants. They acted like merchants, but when needed, they became something else entirely. Target acquired, Chen's tactical officer reported. Tarkos convoy heading to Sector 7, 12 cargo ships with light escort. Chen studied the tactical display. The convoy was carrying manufactured goods to a Tarkos colony world. Destroying it would disrupt supply chains for months. Load cargo cannons with standard freight containers, he ordered. His weapons officer looked confused for a moment, then smiled as he understood. The Fortune's Edge accelerated toward the convoy, broadcasting civilian identification. When the Tarkos escorts challenged them, Chen replied with standard trading protocols, requesting passage through the shipping lane. The Tarkos commander, a veteran enforcer named Gorath, was suspicious. Human vessel, maintain distance. You are not authorized in this sector. Chen kept his voice calm and professional. We are carrying agricultural supplies to Verdex system. This is the fastest route. We are willing to pay standard lane fees. Gorath consulted his orders. All human vessels were to be treated as hostile. But this ship was behaving normally, following protocols, offering to pay fees. Perhaps the intelligence reports were exaggerated. Perhaps only some human merchants were involved in the attacks. Maintain current heading, Gorath said. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. Chen's ship approached slowly, non-threateningly. When they were close enough, he gave the order. His cargo bays opened and launched what appeared to be standard shipping containers. The Tarkos escorts barely had time to react before the containers detonated, filling space with debris and electromagnetic pulses that disabled their sensors and communications. Before the escorts could recover, the Fortune's Edge revealed its hidden weapons and systematically disabled each one. The cargo ships, undefended and panicking, were ordered to dump their cargo and retreat. Within 20 minutes, the convoy was scattered and billions of credits worth of goods floated in space, where they could be recovered later by salvage. Teams Chen documented everything and transmitted the data back to Earth. Every attack was recorded, analyzed, and added to the growing database of Tarkos Guild operations and vulnerabilities. Master, we have lost 16 convoys in 3 days, Velric reported. The humans are targeting our economic infrastructure with precision. They are not trying to conquer territory. They are trying to bankrupt us. Drenvik stared at the strategic displays showing attack locations. The humans were hitting targets across multiple systems simultaneously, forcing the guild to spread its defenses thin. When guild forces concentrated in one area, the attacks shifted to another. It was asymmetric warfare conducted by people who understood how to fight a larger opponent. How many human vessels are involved? Drenvik demanded. Our estimates suggest between 100 and 200 ships, Velric replied. But they move constantly, strike without warning, and disappear before we can respond. Our conventional patrols cannot catch them. Then we need unconventional methods, Drenvik said. He opened a communication channel to his guild council. I am authorizing the formation of a special enforcement fleet. 800 ships drawn from all guild operations. We will hunt these human pirates and destroy them completely. The guild council hesitated. Master, that will require pulling vessels from regular patrols and convoy escorts. It will disrupt our normal operations. Our normal operations are already disrupted, Drenvik snapped. Every day these attacks continue, we lose credibility and profits. Other species are starting to question whether they should continue paying us for protection when we cannot even protect ourselves. We end this now, decisively, or we lose everything we have built. The enforcement fleet began assembling at Nexus Prime. 800 ships represented a significant portion of Tarkos' military strength. Most were converted merchant vessels with added weapons, similar to what humans were using. Some were dedicated warships the Guild had acquired over centuries of enforcing their control. It was an impressive force, more than enough to crush a few hundred human raiders. News of the fleet assembly spread through galactic communication networks. Other species watched with interest. The Tarkos Guild had been the dominant trade power for generations. If humans could challenge that power, the entire economic structure of the sector might change. Some species quietly contacted human representatives, offering support. Others remained neutral, waiting to see which side would win. A few, remembering humanity's bloody history from first contact reports, quietly moved their assets away from potential conflict zones. On Earth, Admiral Maria Rodriguez watched intelligence reports from a command center deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and eyes that had seen combat on 3 continents before humanity reached the stars. She had spent the last 15 years preparing for a conflict that everyone hoped would never come. The Tarkos fleet is assembling at Nexus Prime, her intelligence officer reported. 800 ships. They are planning a major offensive against our merchant vessels. Rodriguez smiled slightly. Good. That is exactly what we wanted them to do. Her staff looked confused. "Admiral, our merchant fleet cannot fight 800 ships. We will be overwhelmed." "Our merchant fleet is not going to fight them," Rodriguez said. She pulled up different tactical displays showing ship positions that were not part of the merchant operation. "Not directly. They have been bait, drawing the Tarkos military out of position. Now we spring the trap." "What trap?" her second-in-command asked. "The one we have been preparing for 20 years, Rodriguez replied. "When humanity joined the Galactic community, we studied every major power. The Tarkos Guild controlled trade, which meant they controlled economic power. We knew eventually we would need to challenge that control or live under their rules forever, so we prepared." She expanded the tactical display to show regions of deep space far from any established shipping lanes. Hidden among asteroid fields and sensor-dead zones were ships that were not part of the merchant fleet. Real warships, Earth's actual military vessels that had been positioned over years, waiting for this exact moment. Protocol Serpent had 2 phases, Rodriguez explained. Phase 1 was economic disruption, conducted by our merchant fleet to provoke a military response. Phase 2 is what happens when they commit their forces to fighting ghosts, while we strike their real centers of power. Commander Chen received new orders while his ship was refueling at a remote human outpost. The orders were simple but significant. All raiding operations were to cease immediately. All merchant vessels were to withdraw to designated safe zones. The real military was taking over. Chen gathered his crew and transmitted the orders. "We did our job," he said. "We drew them out, made them angry, forced them to commit their fleet. Now the professionals take over." His tactical officer looked disappointed. "After all this, we just stop?" Chen smiled. "We are merchants pretending to be military. We have done well. But what is coming next requires people who do not have to pretend. Trust me, you want to be far away when Earth's actual military arrives." The Fortune's Edge and nearly 200 other merchant vessels began withdrawing, broadcasting civilian distress codes, appearing to flee in panic from the approaching Tarkos enforcement fleet. Guildmaster Drenvik watched the retreat and felt victory within his grasp. "They are running," he announced to his fleet. "We have broken their will. Pursue them. Show no mercy. Every human vessel in this sector will be destroyed by the end of the day." His massive fleet advanced, confident and powerful. 800 ships moving in coordinated formation, ready to crush the human resistance completely. They entered the Nexus Corridor, a major shipping lane that connected 7 star systems. It was the heart of Tarkos operations, the route where most of their wealth flowed. Drenvik had chosen this location deliberately. He would destroy the humans where everyone could watch, demonstrating that the Guild's power remained absolute. The human merchant vessels were ahead, seemingly trapped at the far end of the corridor. Drenvik gave the order to attack. His fleet accelerated, weapons charging, ready to end this war with overwhelming force. Then space itself seemed to tear open as 300 human warships emerged from positions they had held in complete silence for days. These were not converted merchant vessels. These were purpose-built military ships designed by a species that had perfected the art of war over thousands of years of fighting itself. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resolution, and watched the Tarkos fleet realize their mistake. "Welcome to the real war," she said quietly. "All ships weapons-free. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity." The Battle of Nexus Corridor was about to begin, and the Tarkos Guild was about to learn that they had not been fighting Earth's military. They had been fighting Earth's merchants. The actual military was something entirely different, something far more dangerous. The price of arrogance Guildmaster Drenvik stood on his command deck watching his tactical displays dissolve into chaos. What had been a triumphant advance moments ago transformed into a nightmare as 300 human warships materialized from sensor-dead zones throughout the Nexus Corridor. His 800 ships suddenly found themselves surrounded, their formations disrupted, their advantage in numbers rendered meaningless by the human positioning. "All ships, combat formation," Drenvik ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Focus fire on their capital ships, overwhelm them with concentrated firepower." But the human fleet did not fight like any enemy the Tarkos Guild had encountered before. They moved with precision that suggested years of practice, their ships coordinating without apparent communication delays. They targeted specific points on Tarkos vessels, disabling engines and weapons with surgical accuracy rather than attempting complete destruction. Admiral Rodriguez watched the battle unfold from the Resolution's command center. She had fought in the resource wars on Earth, commanded peacekeeping forces during the Mars Rebellion, and studied every major space battle in recorded galactic history. She knew exactly what she was doing. Focus on their command and control, Rodriguez ordered. Disable their fleet coordination. Make them fight as individuals rather than as a unified force. Human electronic warfare ships released cascades of sophisticated jamming signals and viral programs. The Tarkos fleet, accustomed to reliable communication networks, suddenly found their coordination falling apart. Ships could not contact their commanders. Tactical displays showed false information. Orders became garbled or failed to transmit entirely. Commander Gorath, the same enforcer who had almost inspected Chen's ship, found his vessel isolated from the fleet. His communication systems were compromised, his sensors showing multiple conflicting readings. When a human cruiser approached, he ordered his crew to fire, but his weapons refused to respond to commands. A communication channel opened, cutting through the jamming. "This is Commander Patricia Walsh of the Earth vessel Determination. Your weapons are disabled. Your engines are functional. You have two choices. Power down completely and your crew will not be harmed, or continue attempting hostile action and we will disable your life support. You have 30 seconds. Gorath had spent 20 years enforcing Tarkos Guild authority. He had never surrendered, never backed down, but he was also responsible for 140 crew members who depended on his decisions. He looked at his tactical officer, saw the same fear he felt reflected there, and made his choice. "We surrender," Gorath said, the words bitter in his mouth. Throughout the battle space, similar decisions were being made. Tarkos captains realized they were fighting an enemy that understood warfare at a level they had never imagined. These were not merchants playing at soldiers. These were professional warriors with technology and tactics refined over centuries of human conflict. Drenvik's flagship, the Pride of Tarkos, took concentrated fire from 4 human destroyers. His shields collapsed under sustained railgun bombardment. His armor cracked from precision missile strikes. His bridge crew fought desperately, but every action was countered before it could take effect. "Guildmaster, we must retreat," Velric urged. "We cannot win this engagement." "No," Drenvik snarled. "We are the Tarkos Guild. We do not retreat. We have ruled this sector for 3 centuries. We will not be defeated by these newcomers." But even as he spoke, he watched his fleet disintegrating on the tactical displays. Ships disabled, captured, or fleeing in disorder. The 800 vessels he had assembled with such confidence were being systematically dismantled by a force that fought with ruthless efficiency. Admiral Rodriguez observed the Tarkos flagship, continuing to fight despite being heavily damaged. She opened a direct channel, her face appearing on Drenvik's screen. "Guildmaster, this battle is over. Your fleet is defeated. Surrender your ship and no more of your people need to die." Drenvik stared at the human admiral. She looked old by their standards, with gray hair and lines in her face. But her eyes held something he recognized from his own mirror, the look of someone who had commanded in real combat, who understood what war truly cost. "You have won nothing," Drenvik said. "Even if you destroy my fleet, the guild remains. We have resources, political connections, economic power across dozens of systems." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "I know, that is why we are not just destroying your fleet. We are ending your guild entirely." She gestured, and new tactical displays appeared showing simultaneous human operations across Tarkos-controlled space. While Drenvik had been assembling his enforcement fleet, human forces had positioned themselves at every major guild installation. Processing centers, banking nodes, administrative stations, all were being simultaneously seized by human military teams. At Nexus Prime, human Marines stormed the central banking facility where the guild maintained its financial records. The Tarkos security forces, already depleted by the fleet deployment, offered minimal resistance. Within 2 hours, human cryptographers had accessed systems containing 300 years of guild financial transactions. At Station Meridian, human engineers took control of the main fuel depot, cutting off supplies to remaining guild forces. At Kargoth Prime, human negotiators made contact with the workers at the processing facilities, offering them continued employment under new management. Throughout guild space, the infrastructure that had supported Tarkos power for 3 centuries was being systematically dismantled and reorganized. and it was being done with a speed and coordination that demonstrated years of planning. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's chief economic strategist, broadcast a message from Earth to all guild-controlled stations. She was a small woman in her 50s with dark hair and glasses, looking more like a teacher than a warrior. To all species currently operating under Tarkos Guild authority, she began, her voice calm and professional. As of today, the monopolistic control of trade routes is ended. New trade agreements will be offered to all parties based on fair market principles. Fees will be reduced to reasonable levels. Protection services will be provided by a coalition force rather than a single guild. She pulled up documents and broadcast them publicly. These are the financial records of the Tarkos Guild. As you can see, they have been charging rates far in excess of operational costs. The difference has been pure profit, enriching guild leaders while keeping member species economically dependent. The revelations caused immediate uproar across the sector. Species that had paid Tarkos fees for generations discovered they had been systematically overcharged. Political leaders who had supported the guild found their constituents demanding explanations. Back in the Nexus corridor, the battle was winding down. Of the 800 ships Drenvik had brought to crush humanity, 633 were captured or disabled. 147 had managed to escape to distant systems. 20 had been completely destroyed in the fighting, their crews lost despite human attempts to minimize casualties. Human losses were minimal. 8 ships destroyed, 23 damaged, 2,300 personnel killed or wounded. For a battle involving over 1,000 vessels, the casualty count was remarkably low. Guildmaster Drenvik sat in his damaged command center, watching his empire collapse on every screen. Human boarding teams were approaching his ship. Soon he would be a prisoner. The mighty Tarkos Guild, power broker for 3 centuries, was being dismantled in a single day. How? He asked Velric, who stood beside him in silence. How did they do this? Velric pulled up data files. They studied us for 20 years, Master. Every convoy route, every financial transaction, every security protocol. While we saw them as merchants, they were gathering intelligence. While we dismissed them as weak, they were preparing for this exact scenario. But why? Drenvik asked. Why go to such effort? They could have paid our fees, traded safely, grown wealthy under our protection. Because that is not who they are, Velric said quietly. I have been researching human history. They fought wars on their homeworld for thousands of years. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. They learned to prepare for threats, to never accept subjugation, to strike first when threatened. We thought we were bullying merchants. We were actually threatening a predator species that has spent its entire existence learning how to fight. Human Marines breached the pride of Tarkos, moving through the corridors with professional efficiency. They secured each section, detained crew members without unnecessary force, and followed protocols that were obviously well practiced. Captain Elizabeth Santos led the boarding team. She was young, only 32, but had already served in 3 major operations. She found Guildmaster Drenvik on his bridge, surrounded by disabled equipment and defeated crew. Guildmaster Drenvik, Santos said formally, you are under arrest for piracy, murder, and economic crimes against humanity and other species. You will be detained and transported to Earth for trial. I demand to be tried by Galactic authorities, Drenvik said, not by your human courts. The Galactic authorities have been notified, Santos replied. They are welcome to send observers. But you committed crimes against human citizens. You executed Commander Sarah Mitchell. You destroyed human property. You threatened human lives. You will face human justice. Drenvik was escorted to a transport ship with other captured guild leadership. The conditions were not cruel. He had a private cell, adequate food, medical attention for his injuries. But he was a prisoner, his power gone, his future uncertain. Admiral Rodriguez coordinated the occupation of former guild territories from the Resolution. Her staff worked around the clock processing surrenders, organizing relief supplies for stations disrupted by the fighting, and establishing temporary governing structures. Admiral, her chief of staff, reported, the Galactic Trade Commission is requesting an emergency meeting. They want to discuss the future of trade regulation in the sector. Tell them we will attend, Rodriguez said. But make it clear that we are not returning to the old system. The Tarkos monopoly is finished. We will establish new trade laws based on fair competition and reasonable fees. A message arrived from Earth. Secretary of Commerce Patricia Chen appeared on Rodriguez's screen, looking tired but satisfied. Admiral, you have done excellent work. The President wants to commend you and your fleet personally. How soon can you return to Earth? Not for a while, Rodriguez replied. We have a sector to stabilize, guild assets to redistribute, new agreements to negotiate. This war lasted 8 hours. The peace will take years to build properly. Chen nodded. Use whatever resources you need. The President has authorized full support. This is bigger than one conflict, Maria. This is about establishing humanity's place in the galactic order. We are no longer newcomers that can be bullied. We are a power that other species will learn to respect. 3 months after the Battle of Nexus Corridor, the new trade agreements were finalized. The Tarkos Guild was dissolved. Its assets were divided among the species that had been exploited by its monopolistic practices. Trading routes were open to fair competition. Protection fees were reduced to levels that actually reflected the cost of security services. Guildmaster Drenvik stood trial on Earth. The proceedings were broadcast throughout the galaxy. He was found guilty of multiple crimes and sentenced to 30 years in a human prison facility. His wealth, accumulated through centuries of extortion, was seized and distributed as restitution to affected parties. Commander James Chen returned to merchant trading, but with a difference. His ship, the Fortune's Edge, was officially recognized as part of Earth's reserve military. He and thousands of other merchant captains maintained their civilian operations, but could be called to service if needed. It was a uniquely human solution to the problem of protecting trade while maintaining a civilian economy. Captain Rebecca Stone attended the memorial service for Commander Sarah Mitchell, the woman whose execution had sparked the war. Stone stood before Mitchell's family and colleagues, struggling to find words. Sarah refused to be bullied, Stone said finally. She stood her ground when it would have been easier to submit. She paid the ultimate price for that courage. We won this war for her and for everyone who would have lived under Tarkos tyranny if we had not fought. Admiral Rodriguez retired from active service 1 year after the war. She had accomplished what she had been preparing for her entire career. Humanity was now recognized as a military power that could not be threatened with impunity. Trade routes were protected by coalition forces rather than exploited by monopolies. The sector was more stable, more fair, more prosperous. She gave one final interview before leaving public service, speaking to a journalist from a galactic news network. Admiral, the journalist asked, many species are afraid of humanity now. They see what you did to the Tarkos Guild and worry that Earth might become the new oppressor. What do you say to those fears? Rodriguez considered the question carefully. I say that fear is healthy. Not because we want to be oppressors, but because fear prevents aggression. The Tarkos Guild was not afraid of us, so they thought they could push us around. They learned otherwise. Other species watching that lesson will think twice before trying similar tactics. But you must admit, the journalist pressed, humanity demonstrated a capacity for violence that shocked many observers. We demonstrated a capacity for effective warfare, Rodriguez corrected. There is a difference. We could have destroyed the Tarkos fleet completely. We could have executed their leadership. We could have seized their territories as our own. Instead, we disabled their ships, captured their leaders for trial, and redistributed their assets fairly. We fought with maximum efficiency, but also maximum restraint. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. This is what other species need to understand about humanity. We are not monsters who enjoy violence. We are survivors who understand that sometimes violence is necessary. We prepare for war so thoroughly that when it comes, we can end it quickly with minimal casualties. That is not cruelty. That is mercy. 5 years after the war, the sector had transformed. Trade flourished under fair competition. New species joined the reformed trading coalition. Human merchant vessels operated safely throughout known space, no longer threatened by predatory practices. In a bar on Nexus Prime, which had been rebuilt as a neutral trading hub, a young Tarkosian trader named Zexel sat with a human merchant named David Park, the son of the former ambassador who had tried to negotiate peace. My father tells stories about Guildmaster Drenvik, Zexel said, sipping his drink. About how powerful the guild was, how everyone feared them. Park nodded. My father tried to negotiate with them. They humiliated him, dismissed humanity as weak. Do you hate us? Zexel asked quietly. The Tarkosians, I mean, for what our guild did? Park thought about that. No, the guild leadership was corrupt, but most Tarkosians were just people trying to live their lives, same as anyone. My father taught me that you judge individuals, not entire species. Sexel looked relieved. That is good. Because I think humans and Tarkosians could be good trading partners now. Fair competition, reasonable fees, mutual benefit. Park smiled and raised his glass. To fair trade and mutual benefit, they drank together, a human and a Tarkosian, building the kind of relationship that would have been impossible under guild control. Around them, traders from dozens of species conducted business, argued prices, made deals. The sector was alive with commerce, protected by coalition security forces that answered to representatives from multiple species rather than a single monopolistic guild. The war had lasted 8 hours. The peace had taken 5 years to build, but it was a peace based on fairness rather than fear, on cooperation rather than exploitation. And throughout the galaxy, species learned a valuable lesson. Humanity would trade peacefully, negotiate fairly, and coexist harmoniously with any species that offered the same respect. But threaten them, bully them, or try to exploit them, and you would discover what centuries of human warfare had created. A species that was very, very good at fighting back.